In a scathing rebuke, India's Ministry of External Affairs has rejected Canada's Foreign Interference Commission report, which paints India as the second most active country in foreign electoral meddling after China. Now, New Delhi fired back, turning the tables and accusing Canada of chronic interference in India's internal affairs, creating a breeding ground, in fact, for illegal migration and organized crime. While the initial Canadian report from May 2023 identified China as the most sophisticated foreign interference threat to the country, the final report claims India had followed suit, engaging through diplomatic channels and proxies. However, New Delhi clearly isn't buying China's smoke and mirrors act anymore. The stampede injured dozens of people early Wednesday as tens of thousands of Hindus rushed to take a holy bath in the river at the massive Mahakumbh festival underway in North India's Prayagraj. Images from the scene in the city of Prayagraj showed rescuers helping injured as the police tried to manage the massive crowds. It was not immediately clear what triggered the panic at the festival, where devotees had congregated from across the world to bathe at the confluence of the Ganges, the Yamuna and the mythical Saraswati rivers. News agency Press Trust of India cited authorities who said injured was sent to a hospital. The Indian Space Research Organization, or ISRO, has marked its 100th launch by putting a navigation satellite into space on Wednesday. The latest rocket launched into dark skies at the Satish Dhawan Space Center in Andhra Pradesh's Sriharikota, using the Geosynchronous Satellite Launch Vehicle, or the GSLV F-15. The rocket powered into the early morning skies, putting the second NVS-02 navigation satellite into orbit. Once fully operational, the navigation with Indian Constellation, or NAV-IC, will work alongside other Indian navigation systems already in orbit to provide more accurate position, velocity, and even timing services to India and its neighboring regions, the ISRO has said in a statement. Trains were cancelled across Bangladesh as railway staff went on strike for higher pensions and other benefits. Now, this affected tens of thousands of passengers and freight transport. Saidur Rahman, the acting president of the Bangladesh Railway Running Staff and Workers Union, said the strike was called after a meeting, in fact, with the interim government headed by Nobel Peace Prize laureate Muhammad Yunus, failed to reach a deal late Monday. Now, Rahman said the strike would continue indefinitely if the government does not accept their demands. The state-run railway system carries some 65 million passengers per year in a densely populated nation of 170 million people. Moreover, it employs around 25,000 people and operates a network of over 36,000 kilometers. In a bold diplomatic move, US President Donald Trump has invited Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to meet at the White House next week. Now, the invitation, the first of its kind during Trump's second term, is scheduled for the 4th of February, although some details are still up in the air. Now, this is according to White House sources. The meeting is set to address key regional issues. This includes the volatile ceasefire deal with Hamas, which Trump's envoy Stephen Witkoff has been pushing for Netanyahu, who faces mounting pressure from the far right, in fact, of his coalition to resume fighting with the militant group. He is expected to discuss his position on continuing the war and other thorny matters, such as relations with Iran and even Saudi Arabia. Drone footage showed the destruction of buildings in Gaza City's Tel Al-Hawa neighborhood, where thousands have arrived for the first time since Monday after more than 15 months of ongoing war. Crowds of displaced Palestinians made the arduous journey back to heavily destroyed northern Gaza for a second day on Tuesday under a fragile ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. The United Nations says that more than 375,000 Palestinians have returned to the north since Israel started letting them on Monday. Meanwhile, families are walking for hours along a seaside road with whatever belongings and food they can carry. The first official Russian delegation to visit Syria since the toppling of the long-term Moscow ally Bashar al-Assad arrived in Damascus on Tuesday. Now, the visit comes as Moscow is keen to secure the fate of 2 military bases in the country, and after Russian President Vladimir Putin, in fact, denied that Moscow had suffered a strategic defeat in West Asia following the fall of Assad. The Russian delegation, which is due to meet the new leadership of the war-ravaged country, includes Deputy Foreign Minister Mikhail Bogdanov, Putin's special envoy to the Middle East and Africa, as well as Alexander Lavrov, the president's special envoy on Syria, RIA Novosti reported. Moscow was one of Assad's key backers, intervening in Syria's civil war in 2015 in his favor. A federal judge has temporarily blocked a push from President Donald Trump to pause federal funding. This while his administration conducts an across-the-board ideological review to uproot progressive initiatives. That's right. The Trump administration plan plunged the U.S. government and states and organizations that rely on federal funding into panic and confusion and set the stage for a constitutional clash over the control of taxpayer money. The order from U.S. District Judge Lauren L. Ali Khan came minutes before the funding freeze was scheduled to go into effect. Meanwhile, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz harshly stamped President Donald Trump for funding freeze, while Attorney General Keith Ellison said he would be joining with other Democratic Attorney Generals in suing, in fact, for an injunction to block the president's action. A federal judge has temporarily blocked the freeze on federal grants and loans that could total trillions of U.S. dollars. In fact, U.S. Judge Lauren L. Ali Khan blocked the action on Tuesday afternoon, minutes before it was set to go into effect. The administrative stay pauses the freeze until Monday. For now, Walz, who was Kamala Harris's running mate in the 2024 election, said Trump did not get a mandate for such draconian action. Listen in.
Donald Trump's reckless action cut off funding to law enforcement, farmers, schools, childcare, veterans, and healthcare. While he was out golfing, he threw the country into crisis. This is not bold. It's not leadership. It's stupid, buffoonish, childish of exactly what they did. Childcare providers across the state, law enforcement, our prisons, things that we count on, individuals on Medicare, things that we know matter to people's lives.
Dead bodies lay on the streets and explosions and gunfire echoed across the largest city in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, or the DRC, on Tuesday. This as fighting continued to rage between the army and Rwanda's M23 rebels. Residents reported continuing gun and mortar fire in Goma, the capital of North Kivu province and a regional humanitarian hub for displaced people, after M23 fighters entered the city on Sunday. At least 100 people have been killed and more than 1,000 wounded in 3 days of heavy fighting, which has already exacerbated the humanitarian crisis in the province. In fact, hospitals were overwhelmed by patients with gunshots and shrapnel wounds, UN and other aid agencies said on Tuesday. The first flights carrying migrants deported from the United States to Colombia after a major diplomatic row have arrived in the capital, Bogota. The Colombian government confirmed on Tuesday that 2 planes carrying migrants had indeed landed. A total of 201 migrants, 110 sent from California and the remaining 90 from Texas were on board. An Italian Navy ship arrived Tuesday in Albania with 49 migrants intercepted in the international waters for processing of their asylum applications at the special Albanian centers, in the third such attempt, in fact, following hurdles earlier raised by Italian courts. Italy's Interior Ministry did not specify the nationality of the migrants brought to the port of Shenzhen, 66 kilometers northwest of the capital, Tirana. But Italian media, however, said they were from Bangladesh, Egypt, Ivory Coast, and Gambia. Local media reported that 5 of the migrants, 2 Bangladeshis, 2 Gambians, and an Ivorian, would be taken to Italy because 4 of them were minors and the 5th, a quote-unquote vulnerable person, without giving more details. Migrants in Mexico who were hoping to go to the U.S. were adjusting to a new reality. This after President Donald Trump began a border crackdown last week. Many asylum seekers waited on Tuesday outside the office of the Mexican Commission for Refugee Aid in Mexico City, in fact, hoping to regularize their status to be able to remain in the country. Now, Trump took office on the 20th of January and signed a series of executive orders to, in fact, beef up border security and slash migration. One ended the use of CBP, one app that has allowed nearly 1 million people mainly seeking asylum, to legally enter the U.S. since January 2023.
Quiere hacer permitido para ver si tiene documento para entrar familia aquí, trabajar aquí, viviendo aquí, comprar casa aquí para viviendo.
The Oklahoma State Board of Education voted Tuesday to approve a proposal requiring parents to report their immigration or citizenship status while enrolling their children in school. Now, the board discussed the proposal for about 20 minutes before approving it and other proposals in a 6-0 vote. The proposal still needs to be approved by the legislature and the governor to take effect. This is per state administrative rules. Malaysia's Chinese community celebrated the Lunar New Year with prayers at various temples in the capital of Kuala Lumpur. Part of the celebration included firecrackers and lion dancers with drums cheering crowds and devotees alike. Packed scenes at the Guandi Temple near Kuala Lumpur's Chinatown saw people visiting temples and enjoying performances. The celebrations mark the Year of the Snake, according to traditional Chinese zodiac calendar. People anxious to see what had become of their properties after the Palisades fire ignited 3 weeks ago waited in their cars for hours for permission to return after officials lifted, in fact, the last remaining evacuation orders. A line of vehicles snaked along the Pacific Coast Highway as motorists inched into a beachside parking lot in Santa Monica. This is where they had to show ID to receive a permit that allowed them to drive into the burn zone. They have to be out of the area by nightfall because a curfew still remains in effect. In fact, officials began letting residents of select areas return starting last week, but only with a police escort. On Monday afternoon, the city lifted all remaining evacuation orders and dropped the escort requirement.
It's nice, it's hard to sort of look at this, but it's nice to find those little things that at one point didn't mean so much. Plates are plates, but now they're a memory to sort of look back on and see the house and where we were for my whole life.
California Governor Gavin Newsom announced a new private sector initiative called LA Rises. Now, this to aid in the recovery from the Los Angeles wildfires. The initiative, supported by leaders like Dodgers chairman Mark Walter and Magic Johnson, aims to rebuild affected communities, including Altadena, Pasadena, and Pacific Palisades. The Mark Walter Family Foundation and the Los Angeles Dodgers Foundation, in fact, have pledged $100 million to kickstart the effort, with additional funds coming from private donations. LA Rises will pool resources from the private sector alongside state and federal support to, in fact, expedite recovery. It's time we slip into a short break now. I'll see you on the other side.